This was a fun conversation from a personal perspective because I went to high school with Jackie Reeves, a painter who also does collage, installations, film, and animations. Jackie grew up making art and exudes a lovely sense of calm confidence, not only in her talent, but also in her choices to make art as child, teen, and adult. She has faith in her drawing hand, her painting hand. I did envy that a little, and I told her so. Did I follow through the right pigeonhole? My mother, as she has listened to these conversations over time, has noticed when artists have grown up in families who've supported, or at least understood, artistic practice versus when they did not. It's in no sense a requirement, but maybe a factor that influences the effort to invest in that practice. We connected on the work one does for oneself compared to commercial work to meet the design needs of clients. Figuring out what we want to share from our own voice can be tricky. Jackie asked the question, beyond skill, what do we choose to create and why? It's not about knowing how, but knowing what. Jackie shares that when she looks over her body of work, it's about claiming space and female identity more broadly, of building up and breaking down. It's your own past flooding in through you, and then we can let it be what it is, let it sit and cook for a while. For those really attentive to detail, near the beginning of our conversation, Jackie refers to university and cégep. In case you wondered, that's the Quebec equivalent of junior college. Here's my conversation with Jackie.
Well, I actually recently broke my wrist, my right hand, which is my painting hand. And I've only just now, I have mobility again. And so I've had a big pause in the actual physical painting, but I've been doing other creative acts to keep me busy, that I can do with one hand or with limited motion. I'm just trying to remember what was I doing and where am I going to pick up and how do I get going again? So, yeah.
So quickly, Jackie Reeves, we went to high school together. Really happy to have the chance to catch up with you. First, I thought you were painting. And then I looked on your website and I'm like, oh no, it's a lot more than paintings. You do many different forms of art.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm primarily a painter, but I do also collage and drawing. I've painted murals. I do community projects and installation. And most recently, I've been doing some film and animation, and that's just in the last year. So some digital work, yeah, kind of all over the place.
Okay, amazing. So if we could just reel back the years for a minute, if you could talk to me a little bit about what drew you to make art originally.
I'd say that goes back to childhood and growing up in an art family. I come from a big family, 7 kids. Both my parents were architects. My dad was kind of an artist at heart that went towards architecture for practical reasons, I think, and also for his interest. But he started out as a painter and drawer. And so that atmosphere was around in my family. So it really began in my childhood. It was just a normal thing to have a sketchbook and to draw in downtime, and our playtime with my siblings often involved making sets and drawing and posters and working on large scale paper from the architectural supplies that were very handy. I would follow the modeling of my older sisters that were just playing with big rolls of paper on the floor, and it just kind of became a habit. And then in high school, I just had an affinity for drawing. I really liked drawing people, and I would sketch all the time, whenever I had free time. I spent a lot of time in the Laurentians up in St. Agathe. We would spend our summers up there, and there was no TV or anything. So our downtime consisted of reading books and drawing, and I wasn't as big of a book reader as other people in my family. I was more interested in drawing the people reading. So that's really where it all kind of took hold, is in my youth. And then when it came time to picking universities or cégep, art was my thing. And it just was the only obvious thing for me to go further into. And I had an older sibling that also had been to art school. So it seemed that's something you can do.
And so maybe when you first started, What are some of the themes that you were exploring through your work, and maybe how has that evolved to now?
Well, in the beginning, like in the post-university realm, I didn't know what I was doing. I honestly was like any young person in their 20s just trying to figure out, okay, now I have this degree in art and design, fine art. What am I going to do with that? And it took me a long time to figure out, my direction as an artist. And so I spent probably 20 years trying this, trying that, doing a little bit of everything and seeing where I landed. So I did graphic design, illustration, painted furniture. It was like whatever I could get my hands on. And then I made the move from Montreal to Massachusetts in 95. So I was just married and I didn't have kids yet. And when I made that move, I landed in Plymouth like the Pilgrims, and ended up having a job there where I met certain people that just took me on a track that was completely unexpected, which was painting murals. So I was doing that for a good 15 years. And that was really where I developed my skills as a painter, a large scale painter. I was doing faux finishing and interior, is kind of like interior design, but then also murals for restaurants and commercial spaces. And then, like, when I was about 40 years old, and this is post having kids, my kids were in their young teens, I went back to grad school because I decided I wanted to try painting for myself. Like, the only painting I had done up to that point was commercial painting, as in, I was creating work for a client and always to meet their design needs. And so I was curious, what would it be like if I made my own paintings? I really didn't know what that was like. And it scared me and it made me nervous, but it was exciting. And so I set myself a deadline to have a show. There's a space around here in my neighborhood that was just opening up, big gallery space. And I put my name in to have a group show with my friends at the time of our own paintings. And so that was what kind of got me going in the direction of thinking about what is my work? Like, what is that? I just really didn't even know. So I'd say that is really the starting point of the evolution of what my voice as an artist, how that's evolved. I'd say like the first 20 years were really about building up my chops as a painter, drawer. I can do all the things, but what was I doing with it? I didn't really click into until, like, that midlife moment. And so now, though, I've been on this track for the last 20 years, and there has been a lot of evolution. At the beginning, wasn't sure what to paint, and I did the most obvious thing to me, which was to paint my family and to paint and draw people that were important to me, because I love to draw figures and I love people. I'm very interested in that. So it started out like that and then just definitely evolved, inspired a lot by different materials. Like, I was just playing with all kinds of materials. At first, I started painting in acrylics because that's what I had been doing with murals. I'd been using water-based paints. And then I'm like, well, I've never done oils. Let's try oils. And then it was like a lot of exploration with oil paint and then collage. And so everything was like new materials would come to me and I just was like eating it all up and wanting to try every which way. So materials are often inspiring the direction of my work. Also, the subject matter has always had its roots kind of in family and family connection, maybe a little bit of the domestic, like what my world is. It's really just like a reflection of what's going on in my life. I have three daughters, so I've just been surrounded by the whole mothering scene and being at home with my kids, and that's been my job as well as being an artist. But I am very much of, like, I would consider myself a stay-at-home mom for the most part. And then just like soon as the kids were in school, I would just go to spend my days in the studio. So I was working, but family was definitely a priority. Anyway, I've gone on a tangent. You can steer me back to
No.
the next question.
No, no. I guess I'm curious, when you hit that moment where you've been doing, because I think a lot of people from different fields can relate to we're doing the work for other people. So we're kind of like
Yeah.
going through motions. We're kind of good at, we're developing the skills, we're building our chops, like you said, and being able to do the work for other people. But when you change the focus to making work for ourselves, I find that kind of because suddenly I'm like, but why am I doing this? And what am I doing? And what are my criteria for knowing if I'm doing it well? And I don't know, all of those things. So that changed like that. I'm curious to just learn a little bit more about what that
Mm.
was like for you.
Oh, that was huge. I'm right on the same page with you when it came to that. I felt very vulnerable, very aware of my, well, I focused on what I lacked, which is probably typical of many people. Even though from the outside perspective, people are like, "What are you talking about? Like you're so good and you can paint and you can draw anything." I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't know what I'm painting and why," like you say. And what is the point? Like in this day and age when we have all the technology of the world, like what is painting really? I decided to go back to school, and I went to grad school. At that point, I enlisted again. I went to Mass Art and decided, you know what, I think I need to study more. I need to learn about art history, really, and contemporary art history in particular. I'd had a lot of art history that led up to turn of the century, 1900s, and I got so much of the European Western art history, but I didn't really have an understanding of the contemporary art world. So I thought that would help me understand, like, what are painters painting today? Like what is going on in the contemporary art world? And it did. I had my 2 years of studies, and that really launched me and me helping me to find my voice as an artist. It's a long process. It will continue for the rest of my days, and every step of the way gets a little, you get to gain a little more confidence. But I found it to be, yeah, scary, vulnerable, and I just was really unsure of myself and had to take in it's been taking a lot of observing other artists, studying other artists, looking at a lot of art, and then looking at myself and looking at what I create and saying, like, huh, isn't that interesting, the way I create? Why do I make art like that? And where does that come from? And how am I a product of my upbringing? All that stuff. So that's just been this really exciting, fun, interesting investigation as an artist that I recommend for everyone.
So this is actually kind of I guess like a personal professional question, but because you mentioned it, so your voice, like you had to discover your voice. And so how would you describe your voice?
Hmm. That's a good question.
That's a challenging question.
That
You can
is a
pass on
challenging
that
one.
if you want. I feel
Whoa.
like,
Okay. On the
oh,
spot.
I didn't
Yeah.
send you that question in advance. I
That
didn't
wasn't
think
on
of
the
it until just
list.
now. I'm like, oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, no, it's a good one because, okay. So off the top of my head, how would I describe my voice? I think if if you were to look at my work, like if one is to look at my work, I think about that often. I try to take myself out of myself and look at my work from a different perspective so that I can see, what am I looking at here? I'm seeing figures, I'm seeing abstraction, I'm seeing figures kind of in motion. And so I have come to see, and especially I'm just preparing for a big show coming up this spring that is going to be kind of like a mid-career retrospective. And so I'm actually looking at all the work that I've made over the last 20 years since I made that decision. And it is interesting to see, like, what I keep coming back to. And so I think my voice is, it's about claiming space. I think that the visuals that you're seeing is always like a female. I tend to focus on women and have representation of females in my work. Because of being a woman, I have 3 daughters. I have 6 siblings of sisters, one brother. Thinking a lot about women and women's voices and my own in particular. So I think that my voice as an artist is speaking about female identity very broadly. There's a lot of movement in my work, a lot of layering, a lot of masking, taking apart and putting together. So it's just like this human, I think my work is about the deconstruction and a reconstruction that happens in life and in art. As we make paintings, we're always like, building up surface and then tearing it down again and building it up again. Or if collage or any of the mediums I work with, it tends to be that sort of arc that it takes, a build up and then a breaking down.
So, the question that came to me was a bit of when you were doing work for other people up until the point where you decided you were going to do work for yourself. Do you see aspects of that that came through, or is it really like you're like, okay, now I'm doing work for myself. Oh, now I'm going to focus on, and I feel these things coming out, or were they always kind of there and then they blossomed? And
Well, there's a visual voice that has been consistent. It's like your handwriting, it doesn't really change that much over the course of, of course you get better, but I think at the point when I started in my 30s and early 40s, I was already quite developed with my drawing hand, my painting hand, and it's recognizable throughout. So that didn't really change a whole lot. It's more the mindset behind it. So as I would evolve, I noticed I kept tapping into the earlier things that I had done in my career. And it's like your whole past floods in through you when you're painting or drawing or creating. Yeah, I'm sure you've experienced that, but it's like amazing how it taps in. Like when you lose yourself in an art process, all your past just is like there. It's like there floating around, and sometimes it just like leaps in. So like, for instance, I had many years of painting murals in a trompe l'oeil style of painting. And then I kind of, in grad school, I sort of dropped that. I was trying to introduce abstraction into my work. But now, every now and then, when I get lost into painting, I have a temptation to do something really realistic and jumping off the page, and then I just let it be. And as I'm painting that way, I'm reminded of my time as a painter that did that for a living. And now I'm like, rather than judging it and being all like, yeah, just judgy about that kind of painting, that, oh, that's not contemporary enough or whatever. I'm like, screw that. Let it be what it is and embrace it. And this is part of my history. This is part of my voice. So things like that pop in all the time, and they jump around in time. It's really quite fun and fascinating how time just kind of levels out in the painting process, and all that history, even from playing as a child, the way that you move in the studio, the way I create, it's coming from everything that's come up to this date in my life. And I just let it come in as it shows up and try not to judge it or turn it off. Just let it be.
it's a little bit different talking with you because I knew you as a young person
Yeah.
and hearing you talk about how your work evolved over time. And I felt at a certain point in my development that like art was not like you're either in art or like if you're not good enough or whatever, you're like you're not in art, you don't get to do art. And that was a very sad time, I feel, for like when that big divide happens where you're like, you're not allowed to do art anymore.
Yeah.
You get shuttled off to this. You were very talented, so you continued in art. Yeah, there's a bit of sadness in me actually that I just think back and think, oh, like there's decades that I could have just, I don't have to
Yeah.
be a great artist, but I could have been making
Doing it.
art and
Yeah.
enjoying making art, and I didn't. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate that you were one of those people who are just like, I'm in it and I'm doing art and I
Yeah.
shall do art. I'm like, great.
Well, I'm lucky that I had that my whole life. And you're right, we do get pigeonholed and we get on these tracks and we think we got to stay on this track, otherwise we're screwed, like what are we going to start all over again? It's too late. I think I am grateful that I had that trajectory of always being in an art field. Like there was a lot of different tracks that I was on within the art field, but it was always in art. So like I did theater, I did music and performance, but it was always a creative something. thank God. Like I'm lucky for that because I meet a lot of adults like you who come back to art at a later point in their lives after they've had a whole career doing whatever else. I am their coach, to say, yes, you are welcome here. Everybody's welcome here, and anybody can do this and dive in. And I'm so interested to see what happens with people like that are just stepping in kind of brand new, but with a full life of experience behind them. And so it's different than teaching young people. Like when you're teaching high schoolers, or they don't have life experience yet. And then when you get these adults who are newly retired that are like, I think I want to take a painting class or a drawing class, and then it's so interesting to see what comes out in the work. It's really rich and mature and thoughtful, and it's really exciting to see. I say to anybody who feels like they don't belong in that world to try to put that criticism, that little nugget away and just dive in. It takes a lot of courage for sure, but what have you got to lose?
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because even for me, when sometimes when I speak with people and they'll say, "But I can't draw," and I'm like,
Yeah,
"Hold on a second." Like, I mean, it depends on what your expectations are and like how much facility you have and how much you've practiced like talking to your hand. And you spoke
yeah,
to that earlier of just being able to like kind of get your hand to do the thing that you see possibly in your mind. But it makes me sad every time I hear somebody say I can't draw because I'm just like,
yeah,
if you're physically able to pick up some kind of instrument to draw with a pencil or like a stick in the sand or
Eh,
everybody can think you can do it. It's just your expectations are stopping you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, I get that all the time. I can't draw a straight line. I say, like, also, again, when you're dealing with adults, I mean, I'm just always asking that question, like, well, what's your end goal? Like, what brings you here? Why do you want this? If you're wanting to get into like the MFA, whatever, then yeah, you might need a drawing class. But if you're here to just create and make things and to feel good about your process, like I'm very focused on process, and enjoy your process and do not focus on the outcomes. And so like there's art for all different reasons. So that's the first question I always ask people, like, what brings you here to taking a class or to diving into art if you haven't really done it before or you've just been interested. So once that's usually established, that some people have always wanted to know how to draw. Other people are like, I have something in my head that I want to make, but I can't make it because I don't know how to draw. And so we dive in. It's like, okay, well, we got to be vulnerable here. Got to just take a chance. You got to start somewhere. Let's just start right here, right now, and see what you make. Work fast and make a lot, and things start to happen. And then it's fun to see when it starts to unravel, because it does. You just need that. Like some people just need that little push at the beginning. And once people realize that the worst judge is yourself, your own worst critic, then it's all going to be okay, and it's really fun once you make discoveries. And so I've noticed in painting and drawing and creating 2D images, no matter what you're painting, in the end, it all comes down to design and composition and understanding that. And that's the big thing that I talk to, students about, is like just what you're making. Yes, that's all important too, but how it sits on the page ends up being the thing that we all critique, like, oh, maybe over here it needs to be, it's values, it's like lights and darks, it's how the eye travels through the page, all that kind of stuff, which can be learned. And I think people had a lot easier time understanding that stuff than drawing, like drawing the figure. That's a lot harder.
Do you think some of that, maybe some of that emphasis that you have on the practical aspect is because that's also how you started your career in the more like you're designing for clients, so you're expected to
Yeah.
create works that meet certain criteria, like whatever objective criteria, those kinds of things.
Yeah, in working with clients, there was often a design that needed to be approved. So yes, you are working a project in phases, which is which is the thing that I've been countering on the second half of my career, because the first half was all very yeah, it was planned out. So there's discussions, here's what you want, here's the framework, like here's the deadline, here's the paycheck, here's the and then like, you know, here's the sketch and here's how it's going to look, and then we're going to start painting. And then of course a lot of things come up along the way and things change, kind of like a construction project would. You know, you think it's going to go one way, but then other things happen along the way and you make adjustments. So I wanted to do the opposite of that when I started painting for myself. I was like, at first I started like, okay, what am I going to draw? Let me do a little thumbnail. Let me plan it. And that is a way to paint, and a lot of people do. I just didn't want to do that anymore. I was like, you know what? I'm going to just throw materials out onto this canvas willy-nilly without knowing what I'm doing, and just let abstraction happen, and then see what triggers and what evolves. And that's been a process that I've been doing for the last 20 years. It has its pitfalls, but ultimately I end up discovering a lot more and about myself, about the materials, than I would if I had tried to plan it out ahead of time.
I might just ask you, now you've talked a bit about process, where you feel vulnerability comes out in that process.
Yeah, it's all very vulnerable. It's so, oh my gosh, nonstop from the moment you start painting, which is why I'm like, I don't like to have people around when I'm painting. Whereas I used to, when I painted commercially, I'd paint in public and murals and people would come by. Oh, that's so amazing. Wow. And like now when I paint, I like to be alone because it is ugly. You know, like what I make is not pretty, and I don't want to be judged. But that's how I felt. And now this is what I preach, which is like, let it be ugly and be okay with it, because ugly is really not ugly. It's just unknown. It's like that whole scale. It's just something you're not recognizing. And for me, that was something I came to understand over time, is that I make something, I'm working on a painting, and I'm like, ugh, this is so terrible. And then I'll just abandon it, or I'll put it away. And then, you know, it sits and it cooks for a while, and I realize, you know, pull it out weeks later or maybe even years later and realize like, oh man, no, that's actually really good. Like, I'm so glad I left it where it was, you know? So I think it's when we don't recognize something and it's new to us. And like, I definitely went through that with contemporary art, because there's a lot of things that I used to look at that I just didn't understand. I'd be like, that's actually really like, ew, like muddy or dark or like messy, or I don't know, things that were not traditionally beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. It took me a while to really kind of embrace that for myself. So that's a place of being of vulnerability, is to accept that of yourself, that you're going to make things that are maybe you yourself don't understand, that you can't make sense of it. And I've come to embrace that now, and just like, if I don't feel that way, then maybe I haven't pushed myself enough. Like if I'm not uncomfortable and feeling vulnerable, then I probably played it too safe.
Check out at Jackie Reeves Art on Instagram and JackieReeves.com to learn more about her work.